The Galactic Council's war chamber buzzed with the mechanical hum of 1,000 different species' breathing apparatus. High Admiral Zephyrus of the Catherian Empire stood before the massive holographic display, his four arms gesturing dismissively at the small blue planet rotating slowly in the center of the room. "Gentlemen, ladies, and various other biological configurations," Zephyrus announced, his translator crackling with static, "I present to you the final obstacle to our complete dominion over this spiral arm of the galaxy, Earth." A ripple of what could only be described as laughter echoed through the chamber, though it came in forms ranging from chittering clicks to deep subsonic rumbles. Commander Vex of the Crystalline Collective stepped forward, her translucent body refracting the holographic light into rainbow patterns. "Admiral, surely you jest," Vex's voice tinkled like breaking glass. "Our intelligence reports indicate this planet's dominant species has barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Their military technology is primitive at best. They still use projectile weapons and chemical explosives." General Thorak, a massive creature resembling a cross between a rhinoceros and a tank, snorted steam from his nostrils. "My scouts report their largest military installations could be crushed by a single heavy cruiser. These humans have no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no gravitational manipulation technology. They are barely above the level of cavemen." The holographic display zoomed in on Earth, showing major population centers and military installations. Red markers indicated known defensive positions, while blue showed strategic resources. What struck most of the assembled military leaders was how scattered and unorganized everything appeared. "Look at this." Admiral Zephyrus pointed to the display with one of his elongated fingers. "Their defensive positions are spread across vast distances with no centralized command structure. They have divided themselves into competing factions they call nations that spend more time fighting each other than preparing for external threats." Fleet Commander Nexus, whose species had evolved from hive-minded insects, buzzed his wings in amusement. "The inefficiency is staggering. How did such a disorganized species ever achieve spaceflight?" "Luck, pure and simple," replied Intelligence Chief Kolor, a being that resembled a floating brain encased in a transparent dome. "Our psychological profiles suggest humans are driven by emotion rather than logic. They make decisions based on feelings rather than calculated strategic advantage. They will crumble at the first sign of superior force." The assembled commanders nodded their various appendages in agreement. Earth represented nothing more than a minor inconvenience, a final cleanup operation before declaring total victory in this sector of space. Admiral Zephyrus manipulated the holographic controls, bringing up detailed terrain maps of Earth's surface. "Notice how much of their planet is covered in what they call wilderness areas. Vast stretches of inefficiently used land covered in vegetation and populated only by non-sentient animals. Any advanced civilization would have converted these areas into productive industrial zones or residential complexes long ago." "Wasteful," agreed General Thorak. "On my homeworld, every square meter is optimized for maximum efficiency. These humans clearly lack the discipline necessary for proper planetary management." Commander Vex studied the rotating planet more closely. "I see they have designated certain areas as national parks and protected wilderness. They actually prevent development in these regions. Such sentimentality will be their downfall." The intelligence brief continued for several hours, with each military leader contributing their observations about human weaknesses. Their weapons were outdated, their tactics were predictable, and their technology was centuries behind galactic standard. Most importantly, their emotional attachment to inefficient concepts like nature preservation and environmental protection demonstrated a fundamental lack of strategic thinking. "The invasion plan is simple," Admiral Zephyrus announced as the briefing drew to a close. "We will deploy standard occupation protocols. Orbital bombardment of major population centers, followed by ground forces to secure strategic resources. Based on our projections, total planetary conquest should take no more than 72 standard hours. General Thorak raised one of his massive arms. Admiral, do we even need ground forces for this operation? Our orbital weapons could eliminate all resistance from space. The Council has specified that human population centers should be preserved for potential slave labor, Zephyrus replied. Many of their industrial facilities could be converted for our use with minimal modification. Besides, our ground commanders need the combat experience. This will serve as an excellent training exercise for our newer recruits. The meeting concluded with assignments being distributed among the various fleet commanders. The Catherian Empire would handle orbital superiority and the initial bombardment. The Crystalline Collective would deploy energy-based ground forces to secure major cities. General Thorak's Heavy Assault Division would crush any organized military resistance. The operation was scheduled to begin in one standard month, giving the various fleets time to assemble at the staging area just beyond Earth's outer solar system. As the war chamber emptied, Intelligence Chief Kolor remained behind, studying the holographic display of Earth with his massive artificial brain. Something nagged at his consciousness, a detail that seemed inconsistent with the rest of the intelligence data. Computer, display human military training facilities, Kolor commanded. The hologram shifted to show various bases and academies around the globe. Most appeared standard for a developing military civilization, but several stood out as unusual. These facilities were located in the most inhospitable terrain on the planet. Dense jungles, frozen Arctic regions, scalding deserts, and mountainous areas that would challenge even advanced species. Computer, what is the purpose of these remote training facilities? According to intercepted human communications, these installations are used for what humans term survival training and special operations preparation, the computer responded in its emotionless, artificial voice. Survival training? Kolor mused. What could they possibly need to survive on their own planet? They have no natural predators capable of threatening an intelligent species, and their climate is remarkably stable compared to most inhabited worlds. The computer provided additional data, showing training exercises that seemed to serve no logical military purpose. Humans would voluntarily enter dangerous environments with minimal equipment and remain there for extended periods. They practiced moving through terrain that would slow or stop most galactic military forces. Most puzzling of all, they seemed to derive satisfaction from overcoming unnecessary challenges. Kolor dismissed the information as further evidence of human irrationality. Clearly, these special operations were nothing more than primitive rituals designed to reinforce social hierarchies within their military structure. The fact that humans wasted time and resources on such inefficient activities only confirmed their weakness. 3 weeks before the scheduled invasion, advanced scout ships took position throughout the solar system, carefully hidden behind asteroids and ice formations to avoid detection by Earth's primitive sensor networks. These scouts would provide real-time intelligence during the assault and serve as backup communication relays. Scout Captain Xylos commanded a reconnaissance vessel concealed behind Jupiter's largest moon. His ship's sensors could penetrate deep into Earth's atmosphere, providing detailed readouts of human military movements and communications traffic. Captain, reported his sensor operator, I'm detecting unusual activity in several of the designated wilderness areas on the target planet. Define unusual, Xylos replied, not looking up from his tactical display. Small groups of humans are moving through extremely difficult terrain at night, avoiding all established transportation routes. They appear to be carrying military equipment, but they're not using any vehicles or support infrastructure. Xylos finally turned his attention to the sensor readings. The data showed dozens of small human signatures scattered across the planet's surface, all moving through areas that should have been impassable without proper equipment. Are these refugee populations fleeing the major cities? Negative, Captain. Communications intercepts indicate these are organized military units. They appear to be positioning themselves in strategic locations throughout the wilderness areas. Strategic locations? Xylos manipulated his controls to get a better view of the human movements. There's nothing strategic about those positions. They're in the middle of nowhere, far from any valuable resources or infrastructure. His communications officer spoke up from across the bridge. Captain, I've been monitoring human military transmissions. They're using a communication system I've never encountered before. Explain. They're not using electronic communications at all, sir. They appear to be utilizing acoustic signals, visual markers, and even trained animal couriers to coordinate their movements. Xylos stared at the communication officer in disbelief. Animal couriers? You mean they're using non-sentient creatures to carry messages? That's the most inefficient communication system I've ever heard of. Yes, sir, but it's also completely undetectable by our electronic surveillance systems. We can see their movements, but we have no idea what they're communicating or coordinating. For the first time since beginning his reconnaissance mission, Scout Captain Xylos felt a slight unease. The human behavior patterns didn't match anything in his extensive military database. Most primitive civilizations either fled to their strongest defensive positions when faced with overwhelming force, or surrendered immediately to avoid unnecessary casualties. These humans were doing neither. Continue monitoring, Xylos ordered. Report any changes in their movement patterns immediately. As the invasion fleet assembled at the edge of the solar system, similar reports filtered in from scout ships positioned around the planet. Humans were abandoning their cities in small groups, disappearing into terrain that galactic military forces considered impassable. Rather than concentrating their defensive efforts around valuable targets, they seemed to be deliberately spreading themselves across the most worthless areas of their planet. Admiral Zephyrus reviewed these reports with growing annoyance. Human behavior was proving even more irrational than the psychological profiles had predicted. They're probably planning some sort of guerrilla resistance from their wilderness areas, he told his staff. It doesn't matter. Our orbital weapons can sterilize any area that becomes problematic. Let them hide in their forests and mountains. We'll simply burn everything down around them. The invasion fleet consisted of over 300 vessels, representing the combined might of 6 different galactic civilizations. Heavy battle cruisers bristled with enough firepower to level continents. Troop transports carried armies equipped with the most advanced weapons and defensive systems known to galactic science. Support ships provided communications, logistics, and battlefield coordination on a scale that could coordinate the conquest of entire star systems. As the fleet moved into attack position around Earth, the human response continued to baffle the galactic commanders. Instead of marshaling their forces for a desperate last stand, humans seemed to be melting away into their planet's wasteland areas. Major cities showed decreasing population levels as more and more humans disappeared into terrain that offered no strategic advantage whatsoever. Admiral, reported Fleet Communications Officer Dendron, we're intercepting massive amounts of human communication traffic, but it's all coming from their wilderness areas rather than their military command centers. What are they saying? Zephyrus demanded. That's just it, sir. Most of their communications appear to be about weather conditions, animal movements, and vegetation growth patterns. Nothing that relates to military planning or defensive strategies. Admiral Zephyrus examined the communication intercepts himself, his 4 eyes scanning the translated text with growing confusion. Humans were reporting which types of trees provided the best concealment, how to identify edible plants, where to find fresh water sources, and how to predict weather changes by observing animal behavior. They were sharing information about topics that had nothing to do with warfare, as understood by any galactic civilization. Sir, interrupted his tactical officer, the human governments are attempting to communicate with us directly. Put them through, Zephyrus ordered. The main view screen activated, showing a collection of human leaders representing their various nations. They appeared remarkably calm for beings facing complete annihilation. We know you're out there, spoke a human who identified himself as the Secretary General of the United Nations. "We're prepared to discuss surrender terms if you'll guarantee the safety of our civilian population." Admiral Zephyrus leaned forward, finally hearing something that made sense. "Unconditional surrender is the only acceptable term. Your military forces will stand down immediately, and your population will be relocated to designated areas for processing." "I'm afraid that's not possible," the human replied. "You see, our military forces aren't exactly standing anywhere at the moment." "Explain." "They've gone native." The orbital bombardment began precisely at dawn, Earth time. Massive energy beams lanced down from the assembled galactic fleet, turning major military installations into smoking craters within minutes. Admiral Zephyrus watched from his command ship as decades of human military development vanished in brilliant flashes of superheated plasma. "Target analysis complete," reported his weapons officer. "All major defensive installations eliminated. No return fire detected. Human military resistance appears to be non-existent." Zephyrus nodded with satisfaction. The operation was proceeding exactly according to plan. "Deploy ground forces to secure primary objectives. I want occupation protocols initiated within the hour." Across the planet's surface, massive troop transports descended through the atmosphere like metallic thunderclouds. The first wave consisted of General Thorax, Heavy Assault Division, armored vehicles designed to crush any organized resistance before it could form. Their sensors showed empty roads, abandoned military bases, and civilians fleeing in panic toward predetermined refugee zones. General Thorax himself commanded the lead assault group, targeting what human intelligence had identified as the Pentagon, the primary command center for Earth's largest military force. His vehicle's massive tracks crushed abandoned automobiles as his division rolled across the landscape toward their objective. "Resistance minimal," Thorax reported over the communication net. "Sporadic small arms fire from fleeing military personnel, but nothing that threatens our advance. These humans are even weaker than our projections indicated." Similar reports came in from assault groups around the globe. Human governments had evacuated their major cities, leaving behind only token military forces that retreated immediately upon encountering galactic troops. Within 6 hours of the initial bombardment, every strategic target on the planet had been secured. "Sir," reported Intelligence Chief Kolor from his position aboard the command ship, "something's wrong with these casualty reports." Admiral Zephyrus looked up from his tactical display. "Define wrong." "Our forces are reporting total victory across all theaters, but the human casualties are far too low. According to our intelligence estimates, Earth's total military personnel should number in the tens of millions. Our forces have encountered fewer than 50,000 active combatants." "Perhaps their military is smaller than we thought," Zephyrus suggested. "Or they're hiding in bunker complexes we haven't detected yet." "No, sir. That's not it." Kolor manipulated his controls to display a global overview of the invasion. "Look at the pattern of resistance. Every engagement follows the same formula. Small groups of humans fire a few ineffective shots, then retreat toward the wilderness areas. They're not trying to hold strategic positions or protect valuable resources. They're deliberately leading our forces away from populated areas and toward terrain that favors defenders." Zephyrus studied the tactical display more carefully. Kolor was right. The human resistance wasn't collapsing randomly. It was following a coordinated withdrawal pattern that made no strategic sense according to conventional military doctrine. "Sir, incoming transmission from General Thorax," announced the communications officer. Thorax's image appeared on the main screen, and for the first time since the invasion began, the massive alien commander looked uncertain. "Admiral, my forces have secured all primary objectives in the North American sector, but we've encountered an unusual problem." "Report." "The humans appear to have deliberately destroyed or disabled most of their own infrastructure before withdrawing." Power plants are offline, communication networks are down, and transportation systems have been systematically sabotaged. More importantly, they've removed or poisoned most of the stored food and water supplies in the areas we've captured. Zephyrus frowned. They're implementing a scorched earth policy. Inconvenient, but not unexpected from a primitive species facing inevitable defeat. That's not the unusual part, sir, Thorak continued. The unusual part is that our forces are having difficulty operating in the abandoned areas. Our environmental systems weren't designed for this planet's atmospheric conditions, and our supply lines are longer than anticipated. Meanwhile, we're detecting increasing human activity in the surrounding wilderness areas. What kind of activity? They appear to be thriving, sir. Long-range sensors show human encampments throughout the forest regions, but they're not using any detectable technology. No energy signatures, no electronic communications, no thermal signatures from artificial heat sources. It's as if they've simply vanished into their planet's ecosystem. Before Admiral Zephyrus could respond, emergency alerts began flashing across his command console. Reports were flooding in from ground forces across the planet, all describing similar phenomena. Human resistance hadn't collapsed. It had simply changed form. Commander Vex's crystalline features appeared on another communication channel, her normally pristine form showing signs of damage. Admiral, my forces are requesting immediate reinforcement in the Amazon sector. We're taking casualties from unknown attackers. Casualties. Zephyrus couldn't hide his surprise. From humans using primitive projectile weapons? That's just it, sir. We can't determine what weapons they're using. My troops report being attacked by projectiles that seem to come from the vegetation itself. Poisoned darts, explosive devices triggered by contact with plant matter, and some kind of projectile weapon that makes no electronic signature whatsoever. Similar reports began arriving from every theater of operation. Galactic forces found themselves struggling against an enemy they couldn't see, using weapons they couldn't detect, operating in terrain that seemed actively hostile to advanced military technology. Scout Captain Xylos, monitoring the situation from his concealed position behind Jupiter's moon, watched in fascination as the tactical situation evolved. Sensor operator, focus our readings on the wilderness areas where human activity is concentrated. Sir, I'm detecting something remarkable. The humans aren't just hiding in these wilderness areas, they're utilizing the entire ecosystem as a weapon system. Explain. They're using naturally occurring plant toxins to create chemical weapons. They're training local animal species to carry messages and equipment. Most remarkably, they seem to have developed tactics specifically designed to exploit the weaknesses of our ground forces. Xylos studied the sensor data more carefully. The humans were doing something no galactic military had ever encountered before. They were fighting as if they were part of the planet itself, rather than an artificial force imposed upon it. Sir, his communications officer interrupted, I'm intercepting human tactical communications again. They're still using that primitive acoustic signaling system, but I'm beginning to recognize patterns in their signals. What kind of patterns? They're not just coordinating military movements, sir. They're sharing real-time information about our forces' positions, weaknesses, and movement patterns. But they're integrating this military intelligence with environmental data about weather, animal behavior, and vegetation growth cycles. On the surface, the Galactic Invasion Force was discovering that Earth's wilderness areas were far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. What had appeared to be inefficient, underdeveloped land was revealing itself to be the most sophisticated defensive system any species had ever encountered. General Thorak found his heavy armor division bogged down in a swampy region that his maps had identified as impassable terrain. His vehicles, designed to operate in the sterile environments of artificial worlds, were struggling with mud, vegetation, and wildlife that seemed determined to interfere with their operations. Sir, reported his chief engineer, our primary sensor array has been disabled by some kind of acidic compound. Chemical analysis indicates it's naturally occurring, but it's been concentrated and applied with remarkable precision. Local wildlife, sir, added his reconnaissance officer. Large quantities of insects carrying what appears to be organic acid compounds. They're targeting our optical sensors and communication equipment specifically. Thorax stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Are you telling me that we're being attacked by insects? Not attacked, sir. More like systematically degraded. The insects appear to be trained or directed to target specific technological components while avoiding areas that would harm human personnel. Across the continent, Commander Vex was dealing with her own technological nightmares. Her energy-based troops were designed to operate in environments where their crystalline forms could interface directly with electronic systems and energy networks. Earth's wilderness areas offered neither. The humans have somehow learned to predict our energy discharge patterns, she reported to Admiral Zephyrus during an emergency tactical conference. They're using reflective surfaces positioned throughout the forest canopy to redirect our weapons' fire back at us. But these aren't artificial mirrors. They're using naturally occurring reflective minerals and even water droplets positioned with incredible precision. Intelligence Chief Kolor had been analyzing the evolving tactical situation from orbit, and his conclusions were deeply disturbing. Admiral, I believe we've fundamentally misunderstood the nature of human civilization. Elaborate. We assumed that their wilderness areas represented underdeveloped, inefficiently used land. But I now believe these areas represent their most advanced military technology. They've spent thousands of years learning to weaponize their planet's natural systems. That's impossible, Zephyrus replied. Our sensors show no artificial structures, no energy signatures, no technological development in those areas whatsoever. Exactly, Kolor said. They've developed military technology that's completely organic, self-sustaining, and indistinguishable from natural ecosystems. It's the most sophisticated defensive system ever created, and we can't target it because we can't tell the difference between the weapons and the environment. The Admiral studied the global tactical display, watching as galactic forces found themselves increasingly isolated and struggling against an enemy that appeared to be the planet itself. Red indicators showed equipment failures, communication disruptions, and casualty reports from across the globe. Sir, interrupted the communications officer, we're receiving another transmission from the human leadership. The same calm human face appeared on the main screen, though this time he was clearly outdoors, surrounded by dense forest vegetation. Admiral, the human said, I believe it's time we discussed new terms for this engagement. Your forces are scattered and hiding in wasteland, Zephyrus replied. You have no leverage for negotiations. Actually, we do. The human gestured to someone off-screen, and the camera angle expanded to show dozens of galactic soldiers sitting calmly around what appeared to be a campfire. They were unarmed, unharmed, and apparently being served food by human personnel. We've been accepting surrenders from your ground forces for the past 6 hours, the human continued. They're discovering that their advanced equipment doesn't work very well when separated from their technological support systems. Fortunately, we're happy to provide food, water, and shelter while we work out the details of your withdrawal from our planet. Admiral Zephyrus stared at the screen in shock. Impossible. Our forces are equipped with the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. Yes, the human agreed. And that's exactly the problem. Your technology is very impressive for fighting wars in space or on artificial worlds, but this is Earth. Welcome to the jungle. Admiral Zephyrus paced the command deck of his flagship, his 4 arms gesturing frantically as reports continued to flood in from the surface. In less than 12 hours, the most powerful invasion force in galactic history had been reduced to a humanitarian crisis. Status report, he demanded for the 5th time in an hour. Intelligence Chief Kolor's massive brain pulsed with a sickly yellow glow as he processed the incoming data. Sir, we have lost effective communication with 67% of our ground forces. Of the remaining units, 83% are requesting immediate medical assistance, supply drops, or evacuation. What about our orbital superiority? Surely we can simply bombardment any area where our forces are being held. Negative, sir. The humans have integrated our personnel into their defensive positions. Any orbital strike would result in massive casualties among our own forces. General Thorak's voice crackled over the communication system, though the signal was weak and filled with static. Admiral, my heavy armor division is completely immobilized. Our vehicles are stuck in terrain that our survey teams classified as easily passable. Worse, the humans somehow convinced my entire engineering corps to surrender. How does one convince an armored engineering unit to surrender? Zephyrus asked incredulously. They offered them hot food and dry shelter, Thorak replied, and even through the poor communication link, his embarrassment was evident. Sir, our rations are designed for short-duration operations in controlled environments. My troops haven't eaten a proper meal in 18 hours. They're soaking wet from some kind of precipitation that our environmental suits can't protect against, and they're being tormented by millions of tiny flying creatures that seem specifically designed to make life miserable. Commander Vex's crystalline form appeared on another communication channel, though her normally perfect transparency was marred by dirt, plant matter, and what appeared to be bird droppings. Admiral, I need to report a complete breakdown in unit cohesion among my energy troops. They're refusing to continue operations. On what grounds? They claim the humans are using some kind of psychological warfare that affects our species' fundamental nature. My troops report that the constant presence of organic matter, the unpredictable acoustic environment, and the complete lack of technological interfaces is causing severe anxiety disorders. Zephyrus closed his primary eyes and rubbed his temples with two of his hands. Commander, we are the most advanced military force in known space. We have conquered 17 different star systems. How is it possible that we're being defeated by a species that hasn't even mastered basic energy manipulation? Sir, interrupted Scout Captain Xylos from his observation position, I believe I can answer that question. Proceed. The humans aren't fighting us with technology, Admiral. They're fighting us with ecology. Every weapon they're using, every tactical advantage they've gained, is based on biological systems that evolved on this planet over millions of years. The main view screen activated, showing detailed sensor readings of the wilderness areas where human resistance was concentrated. What the galactic forces had initially dismissed as primitive camping grounds were revealed to be incredibly sophisticated integrated systems. Observe, Xylos continued, manipulating the display controls. What we initially identified as random vegetation is actually a carefully maintained network of food production, communication, and defensive systems. These trees aren't just obstacles. They're watchtowers, weapons platforms, and communication relays all integrated into a single organism. The display showed time-lapse footage of human activities in the forest areas. Teams of humans moved through the environment with an efficiency that rivaled the most advanced military units, but they did so without using any detectable technology. They gathered food from plants, collected water from natural sources, and communicated using signals that were indistinguishable from natural animal sounds. Sir, added the sensor operator, I'm detecting something even more remarkable. The humans aren't just using their planet's ecosystem. They're directing it. Watch this. The display focused on a particular area where galactic troops were surrounded. As they watched, the forest itself seemed to come alive. Vines grew to entangle equipment, insects swarmed electronic devices with surgical precision, and even the weather seemed to respond to human signals. They're not using technology, Xylos concluded. They are the technology. They've spent their entire evolutionary history learning to function as part of their planet's biological systems, and now they're using that integration as a weapon. Admiral Zephyrus stared at the display in growing horror. Are you saying this entire planet is a weapon? Not a weapon, sir. A living fortress. And we're not fighting the humans. We're fighting the entire biosphere of Earth. Emergency alerts began flashing across the command console as the situation deteriorated further. Galactic forces were discovering that their advanced equipment, designed for the sterile environments of space and artificial worlds, was completely unsuited for Earth's chaotic biological environment. Sir, reported the communications officer, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 more ground units. They're reporting equipment failures, supply shortages, and what they describe as total tactical disorientation. What does that mean? According to the field reports, sir, our forces can't maintain situational awareness in Earth's environment. There are too many variables, too much noise, too much random biological activity. Our tactical computers can't process the data fast enough to provide meaningful battlefield analysis. Meanwhile, the humans seemed to be thriving in conditions that were crippling the most advanced military force in the galaxy. They moved through terrain that stopped armored vehicles, operated effectively in weather that shut down electronic systems, and maintained perfect coordination without using any detectable communication technology. Sir, Intelligence Chief Kohler announced, I'm intercepting a human communication that I believe explains their tactical advantage. Display it. The main screen showed a human military instructor speaking to a group of young soldiers in what appeared to be a dense jungle environment. Remember, the instructor was saying, technology fails, equipment breaks, communication systems go down. But if you know how to read the wind, how to find water, how to identify edible plants, and how to move without leaving tracks, you can survive and fight anywhere. They're teaching their military forces to operate without technology, Kohler explained. While we've been developing more sophisticated equipment, they've been developing more sophisticated humans. Admiral Zephyrus watched as the display showed human soldiers practicing skills that seemed primitive but were proving devastatingly effective. They learned to navigate by reading natural signs, to predict weather by observing animal behavior, and to find food and water sources that were invisible to galactic sensors. Sir, the communications officer announced, we're receiving another transmission from the human leadership. The same human appeared on screen, though this time he was clearly inside some kind of underground facility that appeared to be carved directly from living rock and roots. Admiral, the human said, I think it's time we discuss the terms of your withdrawal from Earth. We don't withdraw, Zephyrus replied through gritted teeth. We are the Galactic Confederation. We have never been defeated by a primitive species. Actually, the human continued calmly, you've been defeated by a very advanced species. You just didn't recognize the advancement because it doesn't look like your technology. The camera angle expanded to show the interior of the human command center. The walls were lined with living wood that somehow displayed tactical information through patterns of light and growth. Water flowed through channels carved in the floor, carrying what appeared to be messages encoded in floating organic markers. The entire facility was clearly a living organism that had been trained to function as a command and control center. We've been watching your species for quite some time, the human continued. Your expansion pattern is very predictable. You conquer worlds by overwhelming their technology with superior technology. But Earth doesn't work that way. Every species uses technology, Zephyrus protested. It's the foundation of civilization. We use technology too, the human replied. But our technology is biological rather than mechanical. We don't build machines. We grow them. We don't manufacture weapons. We cultivate them. And we don't fight against our environment. We fight with it. The display shifted to show aerial views of the galactic forces still operating on Earth's surface. From this perspective, it became clear that the humans had not been defeated or scattered. Instead, they had integrated so completely with Earth's ecosystem that the planet itself had become their army. "Your forces are welcome to remain on Earth as long as they like," the human offered. "But they'll need to learn to live here the way Earth demands, not the way their technology prefers. We're happy to teach them." Teach them what? How to be human. Admiral Zephyrus cut the communication and turned to his tactical staff. "Options. We could withdraw and return with a larger force," suggested General Thorax's voice over the communication system. "Negative," replied Intelligence Chief Kolor. "Size of force is irrelevant. We could bring 1,000,000 ships and 10 billion soldiers, but they would face the same problems. Our technology is incompatible with Earth's environment." "We could sterilize the planet from orbit," suggested Commander Vex. "The Council would never approve genocide against a species that's offering to teach rather than destroy," Zephyrus replied. "Besides, total planetary sterilization would eliminate the resources we came here to secure in the first place." Scout Captain Xylos had been monitoring the conversation from his hidden position, and now he offered a different perspective. "Sir, perhaps we should consider the possibility that we have something to learn from these humans." "Explain." "Every species we've conquered has fought us using variations of our own technology. Energy weapons, armored vehicles, electronic warfare, all systems we understand and can counter. But the humans have developed something entirely different. They've created a military system that's completely sustainable, requires no external resources, and gets stronger the longer a conflict lasts." The implications of Xylos's observation began to sink in throughout the command staff. Earth's wilderness hadn't been an inefficient use of planetary resources. It had been the most sophisticated military preparation in galactic history. "Sir," the communications officer announced, "we're receiving final surrender requests from our remaining ground forces. They report that the humans are offering full amnesty and cultural exchange opportunities for any personnel who wish to learn what they call Earth skills." Admiral Zephyrus looked around his command deck at the faces of his officers. Every species represented in his fleet had reached the pinnacle of technological development, yet they had been defeated by a species that fought with rocks, sticks, and insects. "Sir," Intelligence Chief Kolor said quietly, "I recommend we accept the human offer." "You recommend surrender?" "I recommend education. These humans have achieved something that contradicts everything we know about military science. They've created a defense system that gets more effective the longer it's attacked, requires no maintenance or external support, and can operate indefinitely without technological infrastructure." The tactical display showed the current status of galactic forces on Earth. Red indicators marked equipment failures, supply shortages, and personnel requesting evacuation. Green indicators showed the expanding areas where humans were offering aid, shelter, and training to galactic troops who had surrendered their weapons. "The humans aren't trying to destroy us," Kolor continued. "They're trying to teach us. And perhaps it's time we learn to be students again." Admiral Zephyrus studied the display for a long moment, then activated the communication system. "Put me through to the human leadership." The familiar human face appeared on screen, still surrounded by the organic command center that seemed to pulse with life. "Admiral," the human said with a slight smile, "are you ready to learn how to survive in the universe without technology?" Zephyrus looked around his command deck one final time, then back at the screen. "We're listening." "Excellent. Welcome to Earth. Let's start with the basics. How to find food and water using nothing but your own senses. After that, we'll teach you how to read the weather, navigate by the stars, and communicate without electronics. And then you'll understand why we've never needed to conquer other worlds. When you know how to live anywhere, everywhere becomes home." The greatest military force in galactic history began its most important lesson, learning to be part of something larger than themselves. And in the forests, jungles, mountains, and deserts of Earth, the universe's most advanced warriors discovered what it truly meant to be human.